go ahead and get started since it's silent in the room. I'll just give you a few more people the opportunity to walk in the door. But thank you for being here today. My name is Holly Rivers, and I'm the Associate Director of the Kellogg Institute. And I have been here far, far too long, so I will leave it around how long I have been. But today, we have welcomed some of our undergraduate alumni back to talk about how Kellogg undergraduate programs help shape alumni careers. This is how long I've been here. I can't read anymore. I'm being a reader, so you understand this. But in any case, we have very different people in this room. There's several alumni in the room. There are current students. There's some of our board members. There are family members. So we'll shape this to whatever is useful to you as we start this panel. But the goal today is to kind of talk about how Kellogg has helped shape where our alumni are today, but also just to fully recognize, I mean, the experience at Notre Dame is an integrated experience, right? So there's no one thing or no one program that makes an alum who he or she is, right? It's all of those experiences together that have led our alumni to go where they are today. We hope at the Kellogg Institute that some piece of what we're doing is contributing to that big picture. And so that's part of what we want to talk about today. And I would also say, given the different experience and different people in the room, I mean, for undergrads, it can often be a look at where these people are today. And I always have them say to me, and how can we do that? And I'm like, well, you should see where these people were back. To encourage you that you can do this too. But it's also a chance for other people from the alumni who are in the room to talk about where they are, and you can certainly share in this experience. And for people who are representing the other communities to just learn how we think about these things and what our students do to learn more about Kellogg. So recognizing their very different perspectives, that's what we want to focus in the room today. The fun of this particular panel is we are not a heavy academic panel, and that means that I don't have to do these introductions in the same way. I'm going to make them do it. And one of the things I said to them as part of their introduction is to talk a little bit about what they're doing now, but to also share their Notre Dame that Notre Dame intro that our students always give to help you know where they were when they were here as students. And so, Emmy, I may just have you start.
Sure.
What kind of shape for us what this looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Mediate. I was a class of 2015 grad, which is getting further and further.
But not really that far.
It feels like it all. And when I was on campus, I lived in Lyons Hall. I'll do the dorm major situation. Lived in Lyons Hall. I was in Africana Studies and pre-med major. And then I did the minor in International Development Studies here at Kellogg. And I also did probably everything else under the sun that Kellogg offers. So I just really took advantage of the experience. So I was in the International Scholars Program, did the undergraduate research grant, the internship program, multiple of those opportunities, and really found my academic memory here at the Kellogg Institute. And now fast forward 8 years later, I've gone on to do grad school. I was really lucky enough to be a Rhodes Scholar in 2016, so studied in Oxford. And then since then, I've had a career in public health and global health. I'm now working at an organization called Healthcare Without Harm. So we work around the globe with the healthcare sector to help them address climate change. And I lead our work in the US. I have a foot in the domestic space and still a foot international, which is as well.
So a couple of I finished 2016, and well, my dome is no longer in existence. They used to call it I don't know what they call it nowadays. So I was in and
Major.
Oh, major. So I did political science and history. And after that, I was at Oxford, and currently a presidential fellow in the West and assistant professor at UC at the University of California, San Diego. And
He's still looking to Emmy to guide him.
I feel like there's just too many questions. And yeah, I love sports. I played Euro soccer years. It was fun. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Evie Bauman. I also graduated in 2016.
I did not go to Oxford. I am currently the Director of Sustainability for the City of South Bend. And while at Notre Dame, studied French and economics and did the International Scholars Program and the Experience World Fellowship and generally loved all things Kellogg.
And after graduation, you and Emmy
Did the Kellogg International Development Fellowship Program, where I spent a year in Haiti, and we went to Uganda for a year. We worked with an Italian NGO called OPSI, the Association of Volunteers in International Service.
I'm Bridget. I'm a 2011 grad. I was part of the ISP program and did the Experience in the World Fellowship and the internship and different little grants here and there to go away on breaks. I was a music and peace studies major in undergrad, and I had no idea how to combine my interests and skills and love of the arts and applied theater and music with this passion for peace building and justice. And Kellogg was really a place where I was able to find support and mentorship and like cheerleaders who were like, we see your love of these two things and let's figure out how to bring them together a little bit more. I ended up getting my master's in conflict transformation at Eastern Mennonite University, and I'm a consultant with designing for systems innovation leadership now, and have my own practice in design thinking and facilitation, and really work with organizations around the world to help them upskill their collaboration and work practices to do better work together as humans, and also in terms of the solutions and services that are offered out into the world.
Okay, I'm Andrew. I was a 2016 graduate. Let's see, I was in Duncan. My major was international economics, which was basically just econ with a language. It really wasn't about international economics, but I studied French. And then my minor was international development studies. I felt like I did almost all of the Kellogg programs, but apparently there were some that I didn't. But I really at Notre Dame, I mean, you know, you were saying it's all about the holistic experience, but for me, the holistic experience is pretty much Kellogg. That was really my home. This is where I did everything. And I think this is, you know, was the most definitive part of my undergraduate career and everything I've done kind of afterwards. So, you know, I did, I was ISB, I did the Experience in the World Fellowship and the, I think the research grant. Yeah, and so since then I went and I did my master's in Paris and at Sciences Po in Paris in international development, which is very like practitioner based. It was like people who go there, it's usually to go work for like an NGO, like on the ground. And that's what I did afterwards. I went to Haiti and I worked on the ground in Haiti for 3 years. And kind of after that, when I was working in Haiti, even though I was supposed to be kind of like a project manager doing projects, it was at a university, a Haitian university, and I also got involved in research projects. And then I decided, well, I actually really do enjoy research. And so I went back and I'm doing a PhD now. Although I'm still kind of a mix of, you know, research and practice, because I'm doing my PhD at a company, at the RAND Corporation, which is a consulting firm. It's a policy consulting firm. It's the biggest policy consulting firm for the US military, but I've been lucky enough to, you know, really just do projects with an international focus. And I'm working with kind of through and on the side with RAND, with the World Bank, now doing consulting for them. So yeah.
So if you all can reflect back, you may recall that as undergraduates, students often are looking for the path to get to the place where they want to go. And they're even trying to figure out what is that. And we often have to say to them, there's not going to be a direct path, right? And so I wonder if you can think about back in those days, I would contest that they weren't that long ago, even if you think they were. But back in those days, you know, how did you get from where you were then to where you are now, and also maybe ease the minds a little bit of students who are sitting in the room about, you know, how that works out, as opposed to, did you just have the idea in your mind and you just got there? I don't think the answer is yes. But talk to us a little bit about that. In any order you want to do that.
I'm happy to kick this off because I have had a very non-linear path, and it all sounds wonderful. I've landed, in a really wonderful spot. It has certainly been zigs and zags along the way. Just for some context, when I was here on campus, I really focused on studying HIV/AIDS, and specifically in East Africa. I was lucky to work with Professor Sherry McDonald, who was, the McDonald couple. Was really, learned a lot from him. And carried that focus, but I think for a number of, I'm happy to go into more detail if we get there, but personal reasons, kind of professional interest, ended up kind of steering that into more work around public health and specifically around generally disaster response. So kind of taking some of what I had learned in the HIV crisis. Now I work on the climate crisis. I would argue there's similar large-scale solutions and institutions that we need to mobilize in the way that we did around HIV and are continuing to do. So I've sort of taken some pieces of that, but I've certainly taken, zigzags, thought that I was going to be working in the HIV international space for forever and found myself somewhere very different. But it's not to say I haven't taken what I learned in that field, and then also just the general mentorship. I think someone else spoke about this, just from the folks that I met at Kellogg, whether it's the fellow students, all of these people sitting on the panel, dear friends and colleagues. As well as the faculty. So my path, I don't spare you the whole thing, but it's been 5 different jobs in the last 8 years, and finally have found my home. But it definitely wasn't what I thought I would be doing when I was here in undergrad, and I'm actually really grateful for that. So I found a really nice niche.
So, for me, it's been a direct path.
Sophomore year, he's like, I'm an history professor.
Yeah. But after my first year, I decided, of course, I met a professor by the name of Alumni, a historian here, and he exposed me to African history. I was born in Ghana, so it was something that really meant a lot to me. And of course, Kellogg giving us the money to travel. So it's a good job to do, travel, write about history and engage. So after my first year, I wrote a research plan for myself to get into a program and also to get a job. And I worked with a plan. A lot of people, I know that does not work for a lot of people, but that's how my brain functions, having a 5-year, 10-year plan. And everything has gone according to there, of course, there's some challenges. I remember at Notre Dame, I had planned to apply for the Fulbright fellowship. I got rejected, so I had to shift it, but later down the years, I was able to get a Fulbright. So there was a few hiccups here and there, but ultimately, I think I have been able to stuck with the road, and the research that I started here at Notre Dame has been something that I'm now turning into my book manuscript that I'm working on right now. So for people who are interested in the path, for sure, but also taking time off. So when I got into undergrad, I got straight to a PhD program, and I took a year off to go to Oxford. So it was like reading going too. So people who are interested in taking a year off stuff.
No, I did not have a plan or a path, was very freaked out by that. Senior year, thought I really wanted to do international development, hence 1-year fellowship in Haiti. After the year there, which was really challenging and enlightening in so many ways, pivoted from that and worked in the private sector for 2 years, and then did a public affairs fellowship. And now I'm in local government back in South Bend, where I never would have predicted I'd come back. And just the kind of piece of advice or things I would tell students now, there's one quote from an essay that I read senior year, maybe junior year. It's from this collection of essays called The Opposite of Loneliness, and the article or the essay itself is called Even Artichokes Have Doubts. And in it, the author is interviewing professors. She went to Yale. She was questioning the majority of folks in her class that went into consulting and finance, and just exploring why that's the case. And one professor who she talked to during that time encouraged undergrads there to think about their first 5 to 7 years after undergrad as journeys. Like, the reality is you'll probably do one thing for 2 years, another thing for 3 years, or if you're like Emily or me, one thing for 1 year, then 2 years, then 1 year, then 1 year, then 1 year. And they said by kind of that maybe 5 to 7 year time frame, you'd be interested in
committing to a longer term project, whether that's grad school or a role. And the question is, where do you need to be with yourself when that time comes to commit? That you're not making those choices based on fear or ego. And those are some things I really needed to like free myself of throughout that journey. And the quote that he had was, because if you're just doing things not from a holistic point of view, and just career ladder, jumping, climbing, you'll wake up at 45 married to a stranger. And so just being intentional along those steps and trusting that every step of the way will be valuable no matter what. And the pandemic also really taught me that too. Like that was a pivot back into the international development world for me, but then came back here in South Bend. It's been the most professionally fulfilling role that I've had. So you can only connect the dots backwards, I think. So just taking it one step at a time.
I remember when I was graduating, I had from the music department, everyone was encouraging me to go for the MFA. So I had done all my recordings, I'd submitted to programs. I was starting to get invitations to go audition for this, you know, these classical music, like opera performance programs. And as I started getting invitations to audition, I just had this like energetic, and I remember talking with George Lopez, who had been a mentor of mine throughout my 4 years at Notre Dame. And he was reminding me of like, take a look at like what your actions have been showing you, Bridget. You have been away in Latin America every summer that you've been here, every chance that you could get. Like, that's what that's showing you. And I remember talking to Steve because I spent time in Chile studying abroad and was looking at the Holy Cross Overseas Lay Missionary Program to go back. And I just had this moment where I feel like there were a few key mentors and figures who really encouraged me to tap in on that like soul energetic field beyond like the correct path, that like it's a waste of this music degree if I don't go do an MFA. And I'm so glad that that happened, because I really found my passion for process design and facilitation in those few years that I spent in Chile, like facilitating so much community and group work. And because music has always been a passion of mine in the arts, I have found ways to integrate and weave that into many things that I'm doing now. So I think that my reflection is like our lives are highly emergent and complex, and so is the world. And so it's about finding that like next right step that you can see that like speaks to you on an energetic level, on those more intuitive ways of knowing. And that's like really all we can do is find that next right step that is resonant. And I think like the way to do that is by being in conversation with people who really support you, and not thinking that you have to go it alone and make these decisions by yourself, but calling people up, having conversations. I did the same thing with George Lopez, and I was thinking about master's programs and like, can you support me in thinking through this? Like, I don't even know like which ones I should be going for. And he's like, what do you want? Like, don't worry about the prestige. Like, Bridget, I hear that you're wanting practice. Like, you're wanting practice experience. Like, EMU has a great program in that. Go for it, you know? So I just have so appreciated the conversations and support coaching, really to like really hone in on like, what is the path for you? What are you really wanting? And like, forget all the other stuff and just like lean into the next right step for you. That's my thoughts.
I'll add one other thing. I think what everybody else has said is, very true about, you never really know what your path is going to be, where you're going to end up. I think that's very true. There's a million paths. You can never really, nobody can control the future, and you're never going to be able to control really your own future. You never know what's going to happen. But what I was told at Kellogg, and I think is very important, was always have a plan and then be ready, because that plan's not going to come to fruition. You're gonna have to be flexible, but it's still very valuable and very useful to have. So I think, that's helped me a lot. When I was applying to stuff, I was applying to maybe 3 different places, and on all of those, you have to say, what's your big 5 to 10 year plan for all of them, so I had like 3 5 to 10 year plans. But yeah, exactly. But there's some truth to that too, right? I think it's very valuable to really sit down and really think through what you want to do and how can you get there in 5 to 10 years. And then just be aware that there are always going to be things you can't predict. And maybe maybe your desires are going to change. Maybe you're not going to want the same thing. So be flexible and don't, don't get down on yourself, things don't go as planned. But there is value in having a plan. That's what I would, just add, whatever it was.
Let's focus a little bit on your time on Notre Dame. When I think about the Kellogg Institute and I think about the undergraduate programs we have, the only reason that I think they can be successful is because we have this great connection with faculty. And so there are we as the staff never can seem to come up with what the right number of faculty fellows are at this institute, but maybe it's 120, maybe it's 130 from across campus. But with the opportunity we provide here, I think is incredibly valuable in a lot of ways because you can connect to the faculty affiliated with the institute. And so some of you touched on this a bit, but maybe can you talk about how a faculty member or faculty members in general had an impact on your experience here?
I can
Not
start.
starting anytime. Yeah.
My faculty members here, Professor Ray, and some others too, Professor Reichenberg, Holly, you too. I think you were in the letter too, Holly. And so did Professor Richmond. But I think, Professor Richmond, I worked for her as my ISP professor, and that was the big thrust in all the research I did during my undergraduate career. When I did my ETW and my research in Guadalupe, that was all through ISP. She was there every step of the way with me. And I was an economics major, but Professor Richmond's an anthropologist, and so the connection was more thematically about Haiti at first. But the things I learned, even methodologically, right, about ethnographies and that whole other methodological kind of system or way of thinking was extremely valuable to me. Now that I'm doing like public policy, where you can do economic stuff, you can do statistics and regressions, but that's never going to be 100% of the story. So I think it was extremely valuable to me. That was the big kind of connecting line throughout all my Kellogg programs, was that connection to a faculty member, to my research, to my whole Kellogg experience. There was a lot of great synergy between that. Yeah. Maybe not as much as Greg's. Greg might have been worse. Because Greg was
Okay. So, like I said earlier, I did history of political science, and Paul Aquilov was the one who introduced me to the ISB program. And when I came to the ISB program, I studied under Jamie Black, wonderful scholar. She's a political scientist. And I think having those two really played a role in trying to become an interdisciplinary scholar, where I draw history as well as political science. And that has really helped me in terms of the methodology that I also use to think through my own work. And right now, one of the things I'm trying to do is to also move into the policy world, take the research that I'm doing and bring in conversation, especially trying to understand African development, economic development to be more precise. So I think having those two also showed me how to navigate the academic space as I find myself in that particular arena right now. So in Kellogg, having these amazing fellows and scholars have been tremendous in my own journey.
I agree. Just to say, I think there's just reflecting too, to echo some of what Bridget was saying, just about the mentorship and coaching. My relationship with Terry, so I worked with Terry McDonald, I think I said, who was Mediate and he's my thesis advisor and my minor advisor, but I never actually took a class with him, which I think in actually some ways is really nice in the sense that he really treated me as an equal in our relationship, in our research partnership. We had that kind of a relationship, and that was the first time. So I have close, relationships with other professors, many of the folks in Kellogg Institute, but there's still sort of that like, is my professor, and we're doing the coursework, and then maybe we have some stuff on the side. But to have that relationship with a researcher and a professor on campus who really helped me learn, did a lot of that coaching, helped me find, both academically, learning what my different passions were, and did a lot of just personal coaching and mentorship, was something that's really unique. I don't think you get that at a lot of other places. I know you don't get that at a lot of other places, because I've been to some other academic institutions. And this is just something really special, that sort of relationship that I had with working with Terry, along with Evelyn. And I don't want to name all of them because there's so many wonderful fellows. But I think Andrew said this too. I mean, I also don't want it to go unmentioned. Yes, the faculty are incredible, but also just the staff. I mean, like Holly, maybe we need to rebrand you as like rectress of Kellogg Institute. This was really, for at least my experience at Notre Dame, so much more my home than perhaps some of the other institutions that were part of on campus. So I think spending time, and I had the privilege of working kind of in the office as a staff assistant, just the entire staff, not just the faculty, was really formative for my experience here.
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, with Kellogg too, Paul Achenbach, I took his class the semester freshman year, and he helped me with my Experiencing the World Fellowship application, which then started that trajectory of ISB and working with the Africa Working Group faculty. It too was so much fun and learning so much from them, and working with Pat Bolton as my research professor, who told me to, like, maybe if you can picture doing anything other than getting a PhD, do that. And she had worked like for the New York City Parks Department before, so she just had other experiences too. So just really trusting her advice as well, and then continuing to reach out to her when I was in Haiti and being so overwhelmed, and she's telling me like 3 things a day, just even when there was mentorship lacking, that first role was so valuable. And then coming back at every point in job searches, hey Steve, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? Hey Holly, what do you think? And they're so gracious with their connections too. And so faculty, let alone the alumni from the program, have been so critical. Yeah.
I'm just gonna echo all the, yeah.
I already spoke to them. You did already.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I think was significant during the time you guys are here, and the world's changed a lot, is travel. And so, I mean, whether people in the room recognize some of the programs you're referring to, the ETW, the Experience in the World Fellowships, the Kellogg Research Grants, the internships, all those things were about getting you out into the world. So that you could see what's out there and see what you're saying in the classroom and then relate it to the real world. And it's changed so much these days since the pandemic, and it's harder, I think, to convince students that that's a good idea. And so I wonder if you could maybe talk about the significance of that for you while you were an undergrad, and maybe reflect on that in the world today, because I think you'd be surprised about the way the undergraduate student body is looking at that today compared to when you were.
Some thoughts on this. I'll have sort of 3 things. I've been thinking about this question for a little bit. I just had so much value in a lot of the travel that I did, and I put a number on it before. I think I told that it was like 48K in grants in total that I have sucked from Notre Dame. Not just Kellogg Institute, primarily Kellogg Institute, and I mean, just without a doubt, I mean, right now we're both at Oxford, we can say like that money is not available at an institution like Oxford. So that's pretty incredible. And it's not just the dollar amount of that, but it's what that translated to an experience, at least for me, getting to spend, I mean, in total, the time period translation of that was, all told about 2 years in places that were around the world that I would not have had the chance to really take what I was learning in the classroom and testing out and research into practice. And so that is just, I mean, I just put a price tag and a number on it, but you can't put a number on that. I'm not experience, I think, particularly, from my context is coming from Colorado Springs and having really never traveled abroad, but being really interested in some of these topics, that just experience of being in person. I spent specifically a lot of time in Uganda, just there was no comparison for it. I think the other thing that sometimes goes unnoticed about kind of how those experiences can translate is, I don't work in academia today. So, it might be like, why did you do all of this research and these, projects? The skills that I learned having to be in country and to travel, project management skills, which is not often how we think about it, it was really, really valuable. I mean, obviously the work beforehand of drafting a proposal and writing a grant. And these are things I do in my real job now. But, budgeting, and then once you're in person, navigating like a research team, 2 people, but, 2 folks that I worked with for some interviews. I mean, these are skills that I learned being there in person, doing the research, and then coming back and distilling some of those thoughts. And again, I don't think there's really a substitute that can be said for that. There's just, it was incredibly valuable for my experience, and I think really helped me to translate and to conceptualize. I'm also a very hands-on, practical person, so it was really instrumental for me to take the theoretical down to really being in practice.
Yeah, me too, build on that. I think travel for me has been crucial because my work spans, of course, Latin America, Africa, and the Caribbean. So traveling, getting the opportunity to travel when I was here, I began to see the similarities between Latin America, the Caribbean, and Africa. And right now I'm writing about a group of Ghanaian intellectuals who also travel a lot around the Caribbean and Latin America. So now I'm thinking about travel as an intellectual concept where people are exchanging knowledge and building networks. So that's how travel has really helped me. But also to get the grants, you have to write research grants, right? And to travel. And for me, those skills have come in handy. Because now I've been able to win some of the top fellowships in my field, which has been really, really helpful. And travel has also allowed me to build a lot of networks across Africa and also help consult on different projects. For example, a friend of mine was able to secure $1.2 million to build the largest photo library in Africa. And I've been able to use my skills as a historian to help build exhibitions and like really educate people through photos and pictures. So it's been really crucial in terms of like the ability to amass the wealth that we got here. If you look at different other institutions, you don't get that, right? Especially with the UK.
Undergrad level.
At the undergrad level, unfortunately, undergrads get more money than graduate students. So that I think is something that has really shaped my life.
Yeah, I'll totally echo that. I think that my travel experiences, whether they were outside of the United States or within the United States, but the chance to get out, I think so directly translated into some of the first jobs that I got, both in terms of like what I was able to talk about in the job interview, that those were the experiences that I was like relying on to talk about in the job interview. Not to mention like the whole set of tangible skills that are worked on through experiences like that, the language skills, communicating cross-culturally, project management, leadership, all of that was just like so furthered. And I think that having that hands-on experience too is also so helpful for me in noticing along the way what I liked and what I didn't like in sort of more professional settings. So it helped to shape my decisions because I was getting feedback and experience to myself. So I think it's interesting thinking about like post-pandemic or the effect of the pandemic, and like we are a very like global, remote, distributed world. And so much of my current work right now happens remotely, and that's awesome. Like there's amazing collaborative tools and ways of working together across place that are happening. And I think all of that is furthered by the chance to be in person. And I think it's almost like part of our work and our calling right now to be reminded to push ourselves actually to get back out there and be in person. Because like as human beings, as civic society, we need that. And I see in places of my work that we've like forgotten it a little bit, how much we need that and how much we need to be together. So in addition to being like amazing on so many levels and for different reasons, I actually think it's like something that we're being called into to like lead back into that space.
I think, first of all, I find it shocking that students today don't want to travel. I mean, I understand the pandemic, but you know, you're at the Kellogg Institute for International Studies. You're interested in international affairs, or whatever side you're interested in. I think, you know, it's just extremely important, I think, to be able to have that experience, no matter what you want to do. Whether it's, you know, obviously if you're doing like international development, like I kind of was, you know, there's so much value in being able to go down there and be on the ground. For my master's program at SPO, you know, I had to do an internship and I ended up doing two. I did one with USAID at first in Washington DC in the office with USAID. And then I did one on the ground with the Peasants Association in Fondwa. And wow, the difference between the two. I mean, you learn good stuff in both. But there is so much value to the on the ground experience, to understanding how projects are actually run and managed from that high level dollars and you know, oh, all you see are these the monitoring indicators, right? And people don't look at those very closely. First of all, it's about spending the money. We got to spend that money, at least for USAID. When I worked there, it was all about how can we spend the money the fastest. And then on the ground, you know, you really see the reality of like what that causes into the project. And there's a huge disconnect in international development between those two sides of it. So for students who are interested in international development, you have to work on the ground. You have to have that experience, I think. Even at a place like USAID, you know, the people who have a lot of those positions, you know, they have experience on the ground too. They might start off in an office and then do like a year working somewhere. But yeah, I mean, I can say all the same things y'all said about all the different value of traveling. One thing I'll point out too, I think Kellogg is a very diverse place, especially for Notre Dame, but it's still very American, I think, in a lot of ways, which nothing wrong with that. America is great. I think traveling is a great way to prepare you to work with more international teams, which you will have to do if you're working in international development, in international affairs, right? In Haiti, I was the only American. My team was Haitians, French, Cubans, Brazilians, and we all spoke French together, right? And that is a great way to really understand just how to learn to adapt and overcome cultural language barriers with people. That experience is very valuable, I think. So I definitely can't underestimate the value of traveling.
And if I may quickly add, I think the experience that I got from traveling was very helpful. So during the pandemic, the Western band traveling, I was the only person that they made an exception for because I had a vast experience in traveling. So I was able to travel during the COVID, but of course they got me to sign all these papers. But the experience that I gained from Kellogg was very instrumental in making that case.
And on this note, yeah, students that aren't taking advantage of traveling away from the permacloud in South Bend, I'm not sure. Winter here is very challenging, so just stepping away. But to Andrew's point too of like expanding your horizons, different ways of working, building relationships, and a lot of the themes from the past panels have been around dignity and accompaniment and like working with people. And I feel like when you're only staying here and doing these projects, you jump in as the expert, there's no accountability, there's no relationship, and going somewhere and seeing that these are not just your test subjects, objects, whatever, they're not just indicators, we're not just putting resource in this for my own selfish outcome, that is actually a project built together is really empowering and quite humbling when you're working in another language too, and working with colleagues that speak 5 different languages, and then you realize like, you have a lot of work to do. It recommitted me to studying French. Holly, when I went to Senegal summer after first year, was like, I studied French for 7 years before I did it.
And I think it wasn't any good.
You want to go after 1 year? And I was like, yeah. And while the time needed a translator, it was a mess. And so just really learning about all that's required to both do rigorous research, to build genuine relationships, to build trust and grow. It was invaluable.
But a couple of things, I've been thinking about this a lot, and a couple of things you guys have said stick with me here. And one is, we've had to push ourselves again and challenge ourselves, and that's hard, right? Like the pandemic was hard, and getting back out there is hard, and getting out of your comfort zone. And I think because we went through difficult times, it's harder now to get people to do that. And to a point, also to say, traveling and doing this kind of work isn't easy. And you know, I think I always said to you guys, don't go out and talk to students and tell them this is fun and this is great, because this is not the case. And when you get out into the spaces and you're alone and it's hard and you wish somebody else were with you, you know, it is a difficult thing to do. And I guess and one, since I guess I'm asking you just to reflect a little bit, and again, as I've been thinking about the campus today, you know, I always felt that what we're trying to do at Kellogg is challenge you and trying to not let you stay in your comfort zone and not let you do the thing that would be easy, that you can walk away from here and have done the easiest thing you could have, and you still would be great and brilliant, you would. But what I always felt like our job was to kind of push you to do more because you can, and you guys have obviously proven them. And I just wonder how you know, if anybody has any reflections on it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I've been like.
Oh, yeah, talk. Yeah, no, I think, yeah, those are really fantastic points. It is extremely challenging, especially kind of the first time. Like the first experience in the World Fellowship, I went to Guadeloupe, which they speak French, and I, you know, studied French for 4 years in high school and then 2 years in Notre Dame, and I still had to end up doing sign language there, right? And so really, that's the only way you can learn language is by really going to a place and being forced to use it. But you know, that was really the baptism by fire, and there's so much reward from that kind of baptism by fire. But you really have to put yourself out there and get out of your comfort zone and make that effort and look like an idiot, right? You have to, even if you're not in a country where you speak the same language as the people, you know, fluently, you're probably still going to look like an idiot at first trying to talk to people because you don't understand them the way you understand maybe your own kind of a culture or whatever. Even you know, I'm super comfortable in Haiti. I feel like I'm 100% comfortable in Haiti, and I go to Santo Domingo, the Dominican Republic, same side of the island. I think everything's gonna be similar over there. Not at all, man. Just not at all. And trying to act like I'm in Haiti over there, not good. You know, don't get the same results. Yeah, I think there is absolutely a baptism by fire. I don't think you should be afraid of that. I think you should be excited about that. I think you should seek that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. In some of the leadership coaching and work that I'm a part of now, we have this model of like, what's your comfort zone, what's your stretch zone, and what's your panic zone. And we don't really want you to be in either your comfort or your panic, but finding what that stretch zone is. And this notion that like perfection is the most harmful lie that we've ever been taught. And it's still like very rampant in our society and at places like Notre Dame, like really high achievers and stuff. But really we need to be like celebrating meltdown moments. Like, what was your meltdown moment? What was mine? Like, it is never a failure. It's always a lesson. And the more that we can get comfortable of like understanding that we know that we are in our stretch zone, which is the edge of leadership and the edge of our possibility and potential that we can bring to the world, is when we have discomfort, is when we have mess, is when we have some moments of failure, but that are like rich and ripe with learning. So I think that that is like the place that we should all be kind of pushing ourselves to be, is like finding what is that stretch zone for you. And maybe we need to get better about integrating at, you know, conversations and when our community comes together about talking about the F up nights, the meltdown moments, and harvesting all of the rich learning and lesson that comes from that place. Because in practice, we all know that that's what it is, but we just don't talk about it as much.
I love, Bridget, that you said the meltdown moment, because I was just thinking back, and I'm sure all of us are doing the same thing. Multiple meltdown moments of each of my times abroad, and sometimes it was like literal, I mean, like bouts of traveler's diarrhea, like physical disability, like mental. But in any case, like I can go back and think about some of those meltdown moments that really were stretch growth opportunities of, you know, what the heck am I doing here? This research isn't going well. I've tried to stand up at the Ministry of Health to get them to talk to me, and they haven't for like 2 days. You know, I mean, just like there's sort of these moments that I can think back on of all of those experiences that I just walked through, spending time abroad, where it was like, what am I like? I feel quite alone. You know, things are not going well with the research I'm supposed to be doing, or an internship, or whatever it is. And really in those moments, having developed the skills that, you know, again, I think the growth was exponential than if I had not had those experiences. It was incredible. And I would also say, going back to the point about the faculty and quite frankly, the fellow students that you have in your cohorts, the current students who are here. I mean, Evie and I can attest to this, we were on that fellowship the same year, and there's another couple people who were doing similar experiences, and just the camaraderie of then going through those meltdown moments together, or like, hey, I'm having this crappy day, and like they really get it. You're going through similar things. That's something really powerful.
Yeah, that's just what I would uplift, is you're actually not alone. This is the best part of that digital connected world, that you could be as connected. I'd be in the office in Haiti and messaging Chris Newton, who is in Student and talking about our various issues. And that was so life-giving too, if you're not alone. So you can be in that stretch zone, but also accompanied by folks. So it's really possible to have that support too. And Kellogg especially leans in for you too when you need that. So.
And to also be the one for everybody who's saying, and I really like the point when we're talking about, I've been studying French my whole life too, you know, and I got to Senegal, just like, you know, so I really think that when people are thrown into something, you're forced to react. And I began to learn Wolof on the go and all these things, but when I was in the US, the French, I'm doing well, I'm getting A's in my French classes, so it's a whole different engagement that I think when you were put in the middle of these things really shift. And I remember when I first went to, I was born in Ghana, but like I said, I lived until I was 12 and I moved to the US, my whole family lived in the US. So when I went back, it was really challenging because I did not know anybody. I remember I called my parents 2 weeks in that I wanted to leave, you know, it was really hard. But after a while, you know, things got better. You started building networks, but you tell people that, oh, can we meet at 10? 6 hours later, they're still coming. So there's all these frustrations when you go and read. You know, come back later. I mean, you're not even, some people don't even have the audacity to tell you I'm not going to show up. You know? So these are a lot of challenges that we face, and sometimes people don't talk to you about. That's why, especially in grad school, they let you write this whole research proposal, what to expect. I just go into research knowing that I can't expect anything because people are just going to disappoint you. And that's not right. I'm really happy to. I was in Grenada. I spoke to one guy. It was my first time in Grenada. He showed up with me. He's like, oh, I'll show you around. Don't worry. I called this person the phone one day. I don't know if he blocked me. I never got back, you know. So these are all the unexpected. So I think when people are exposed to the unexpected, at least they're very much prepared to what is on the ground to also then bring to bear in the classroom new experiences that you don't necessarily get it from reading all these textbooks, you know. Yeah.
When you look at where you are today, and then you think back about your experience in Notre Dame, think back, what's one thing that you feel like had an impact on getting you where you are today? It does not have to be the Kellogg Institute. It doesn't have to be anything with us at all, but just think about what's something you did back here that you know had an impact on where you've gotten today. I think it'd be anything at Notre Dame.
I mean, I think I've already spoken to mine a bit, but I would highlight the Experiencing the World Fellowship, the internship, study abroad, as like really critical and shaping moments. And then in addition to that, just the relational side of things. And if I look back and if there's like anything that I wish I would have done even more of, it would have been to tap even deeper into the community of practice, the network, the relationships, and make it like even more of a point to have more conversations, to tap you all even for more connections or people that I could have scheduled phone calls with or things like that. I just think like relationship is it's everything. And that was a very helpful piece for me.
Yeah, I think this is a very difficult question, Holly, for the exact same thing you brought up at first. It's just so hard to kind of isolate one thing and say this is the causal factor. Causality is always difficult to, you know, prove. But especially here. But yeah, I think, relationships, make sure you're talking to all of your professors in all of your classes, but especially like on the Kellogg, the people in the Kellogg Institute, I think. And traveling, and one non-Kellogg thing actually, but Hughes, the Hughes Institute, get really involved in there. They were huge for me too. And I think they should all know what Hughes is. Y'all should all know what Hughes is. Yeah.
Well, the ISP people that are in Pittsburgh compute.
Yeah, okay, good, extremely important. That's a huge help for understanding how to help you kind of visualize and plan what you're gonna do after Notre Dame. Yeah.
For me, probably unlike most people, I never heard of Notre Dame before. I had no idea I even applied, cause I wanted to go to law school, but I got rejected. And it shook me because I was expected to get in. I was part of sports, I was tutoring in my class, every block that you think of, I checked. But I got rejected in the early action, early decision, whatever they call it. So after I got rejected by they call it, I think, college advisors, student advisors, in high school, they gave me a few waivers. So I was very shy kid. And I had a lot of friends, so I just sat down and started using the few waivers to apply to so many colleges. I applied to hundreds. So one time, I remember I got the Notre Dame acceptance letter. I was about to toss it out. I called my uncle called me. He actually lives in Chicago. So I go, man, this is school called Notre Dame. It's something I never heard of it, like, to be honest. It was like that words. Accepted me, but that's nothing. I'm just gonna add it to the pile. And he's like, no. I mean, people go there and just do a summer program, put them on TV. Let me look at it. I grew up in North Carolina, and I knew I did not want to go into any. I've gone to all the top schools in North Carolina, but I just knew I had to go somewhere else to really the person who I am today. So when I started looking into Notre Dame, of course, eventually they gave me a full scholarship. I was like, oh, okay, let me come to this place. So when I got here, I never did, because I did not know about it. I never did the station week. But I did this program. It was called Balfour-Hirschberg's scholarship program, which so they sent me like a flyer and apply. So they bring especially minority students, the first generation, to come to campus and help them adjust to the college life. And that really had a huge impact on me, because it was there that they also started talking about different opportunities. And I made up my mind that if there's anything called opportunity, I show up. Really make a conscious effort. Because when I tell people that I was shy, nobody believes me. So when my friends from high school came to visit, and I told them, I'm now well known across campus. They're like, no. I said hi to one person. They're like, I'm just one. And then two, and they're like, so basically what I'm trying to say is that the community that I found myself in, and in affirming the words that Father Jenkins spoke about, let no one ever again say you're too small, has been something that I carry with me every day. When I was here, I looked at it every morning, every evening. I told myself that no one ever again say you're too small. And it's really like, it was not, Notre Dame does not just tell you that, but it gives you the resources to succeed. And that is something that you will not find anywhere else. So I really appreciate that.
There.
Well, with that, then I'm gonna open this up to questions from all of you, see if you want to ask. Yeah, Jake.
Thank you all for coming and giving a talk. I actually had a question about like ETW, because I'm about to go into an ETW. I'm also about to go study abroad, and so I'm kind of thinking about both those opportunities and kind of like what did you see as the strengths of both of those, and how would you approach that? And also kind of like knowing what you know now, are there things you would do differently during the ETW? Like if you're traveling about?
Can you share just briefly where you're going for each
Yeah.
of those?
So I'm going to an ETW to Morocco, working with another anthropologist. I'm an anthropology major. And then also going to Copenhagen in the fall of the
I can start. I did an ETW. The biggest thing I wish I had, or looking back at my ETW, I think what I would have done differently maybe, or the advice I would have given myself, that's the way to phrase it. Or doing the ETW is, scale back your ambition. You're only there for like 2 months. You're not gonna do all your research for your eventual dissertation you wanna do. I assume you're a sophomore, or you're gonna be a sophomore. You are a sophomore, you're gonna be a junior, that's right, it's in your sophomore. Usually, that's what mine was too. You know, think of this more as like something you can build off of later. So I did my ETW, and then the next summer I did my research grant in the same place with the same people, kind of on the same topic. And that became my my international development capstone project, right? So I think, you know, with the ETW, it's about getting experience on the ground, like doing research and things. I think the study abroad is more about, you know, expanding kind of your horizons. And for me, it was about learning a language, because then I did my ETW in Guadeloupe, and then I studied abroad in France. And, you know, both of them speak French, but France, you know, Guadeloupe was about working with Haitians in Guadeloupe, and then France was just kind of learning French, even though I ended up living in Paris after Notre Dame for like two years. So I think, yeah, you're going to be trying to accomplish very different things with each of them. And they can both be part of your same kind of growth. So I don't think you need to think of any sort of like pros and cons of either. Just think about, what do I want to accomplish with this? What do I want to accomplish with this? And if you're going to study abroad too, is it with a lot of Notre Dame students? It's not. Okay, good. That's what I was going to say. If you're going to study abroad with a lot of Notre Dame students, do not spend all your time with only Notre Dame students. But you don't have to worry about that. That's good. Make sure you meet people there. That's the biggest thing. When in Guadeloupe, the host family I stayed with, their youngest son was my same age. He was doing his undergraduate. He ended up doing his master's in Paris when I did my master's in Paris. When I went to Paris, I didn't have my scholarship didn't come in. Like the first month I got there was coming in like 1 month after I got there. So I got into Paris with very little money, and he let me stay there with him in his house. You know, gave me food, gave me lodging for a whole month. So those are the kind of relationships you never know how they're going to pay off. And then, you know, last year I was in his wedding, and he's going to be in my wedding as a groomsman. I mean, you know, we became extremely close. So you never know what kind of relationships you're going to build. So yeah, meet people too. Yeah.
To build up Andy's point, because I also did the ETW and then did research. So the ETW, I did it in Ghana. One advice that I would definitely say is, at first it was not necessarily keeping my advisor up to date with what I was doing. Because I went there to do research, and I had no idea what research was. I went to the library. I was just doing research in the library, just reading people's books. And then later when I told him, he was like, "Right, you can get all those books at ND." So you're supposed to go to that. Research material, interview with people. So I think keeping one's advisor up to date.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And then, because we also spoke, we had a plan. Paul and I love to work on plans. So I did the study abroad program in London, and Ghana was a former colony of the British. So the plan was also, after the study abroad, I would just stay longer with a Mediate grant to then do more research. So those research are going to be crucial to my CBA thesis. So you can plan, yeah.
Can I just say something that some of you might not know, is that Andrew wanted to go to Haiti,
That's right. Yeah.
and partly because of his brother here, who's sitting right here, Bauman. And Notre Dame had a policy of not allowing Haitian students to go to Haiti, undergrads to do independent research in Haiti. And so because Guadeloupe is has for a long time been a major destination of people from Haiti. We cooked up the idea of the family, so you could be with Haitian immigrants. And so the young man you're referring to, for example, who became your good friend, he's a Haitian.
Yeah.
Born in Guadeloupe, like Karine Jean-Pierre, right, who's the press secretary for our presidential administration. She's a good example of someone whose parents migrated to Guadeloupe.
Yeah.
And she speaks Creole. So that's just another thing to know about searching for opportunities that you talked about, that the door might look like it's closed. You can't go to Haiti, but there are other ways to get engaged in research with Haitians, and then eventually led you back to Haiti, where you worked at the only Creole speaking college for 3 years.
Exactly. Yeah, that is a fantastic, thank you for adding that. That's so true, everything. When one door closes, find a different way to get there, that's yeah.
Does anyone else want to add to Jake's question?
So,
Oh, no, new question. Yeah, new question, so I was just making sure, but go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm curious how this family factor into like your parents, because the work and the stuff, all of you are saying, well, most of you, it's not very linear. So how do you navigate? Like for me, I did Croc and Kellogg and all these things, and my mom's like, what exactly is that? Like you said 5 jobs in 7 years. Then how does, and like I'm assuming your family plays a role in what you say and what you do. How did those conversations go?
I'll start on that. Because I have a couple that I'm curious. I mean, the first one I think is just, I feel really lucky, and coming to Notre Dame became even more lucky to have had my parents who said, we have no idea, we don't understand what you're doing at Notre Dame. Like, it's just not the things I was studying, and some of it, they don't really know where it came from, but we're really supportive. And I think that unfortunately, that's not always the case from what I understand of students at Notre Dame. It's kind of like, what are you doing? Why aren't you in the finance major? Like, this is the thing that we hear. So I would say it started from having really wonderful parents and other mentors who let me do some of that exploring and jumping around and saying that that's okay and that's how growth happens, right? We spoke about that. But bringing it a little bit, closer, I think part of the reason for all the job shifts I mentioned, I mean, I had a really interesting experience. So I'm part of the queer community, and during some of the period that I spent a lot of time in Uganda, criminality was criminalized and there's the death penalty. That was a really tricky experience. And that was when I first started to think, I wanted to build this career of international development. I really was like, I'm going to spend my whole life in Uganda. Like, this is like sort of where I was at. And I really had to think about some of those decisions. And part of the reason I now have pivoted a little to have some of that international focus, but working domestically is just by virtue of my personal life. And I'm now married to a woman, and we live in Virginia together. It's wonderful. And I have some touch points I've gone back to visit, but just sorting through what made sense for where I was in my personal situation. And I'm really lucky and privileged to have that opportunity to live in the US, where our experience is far different from many of the folks I still have connections to in that movement in Uganda. But all of that is to say, I think what's behind the scenes of like the pivots and the things that I just said is like there were some factors like that, or one of my parents and my brother are going through some pretty difficult situations and some mental health stuff. So it's like being here actually became really, really important for me. And I really struggled for a time. I've talked with Evie about this of like, what is the next thing within the boundaries of like the personal pieces we often don't talk about. And I had to sort of reshape. I'm really glad I found something where I have that connection to the international work and stuff that I'm so passionate about, but I did have to reshape that a little for myself. And I think it's really important that you ask that question, because I think we don't often like sitting on these things, so think, oh yes, and then I did this thing and it's the professional path, but there really is a secondary personal path the whole time that is behind a lot of the switching around that I did as I was coming into my own identity and relationships and family dynamics as well.
Definitely. I remember, again, I'm gonna just name drop George Lopez. How influential he was in that for me, because I remember when I first started studying peace studies at Notre Dame, my parents, my dad was like, what is this? Like, what? And I remember like once parents or family have like a tangible kind of idea of like what's happening here, there's like people involved, and like I wasn't gonna follow George's path of like UN and USIP and like economic sanctions and all, but like he was so helpful and like talking to my parents when they came to campus so that they had like a tangible idea of like, oh, there are career paths that are available in this kind of thing, and coming to Kellogg and meeting different people and like exposing them to this whole world that exists. I guess it was like we were moving in tandem, because I didn't really know also what I was leaning into, but I had that more tangible experience and inspiration that was like keeping me going. So, and then it's been like really, I feel like my dad still will always be like, I still don't really even know how to talk about what you do, but there's like more of an awareness and celebration and kind of excitement of like, you know, bringing them along through the way. But definitely, again, just like the community and faculty and people here were really helpful for me and kind of helping to bring my family along to the choices that I was making.
I'll jump in and just say too that there's a level of like privilege, not having gotten a scholarship to go to Notre Dame, very limited financial pressure too. So I know that's a very real factor for so many folks that attend, and probably keep you from doing Kellogg programs, and knowing that that's an option to have an income that way as well. So uplifting stories of friends of mine too that went one path to accounting to like satisfy that parental need, and actually then switched to another job before they communicated that to them. I mean, everybody works it out their own ways, but of proving a viable path before your parents or family might not be ready to come on that with you, but feeling secure and leaning on your community then when you're making those choices too. So for a moment, kind of deciding on when timing is right to communicate that and share. But the overarching note too, for even my parents, when I was like, I'm going to Haiti for a year, they were like, well, I guess if Notre Dame says it's okay, like. Even though people.
I don't like the answer.
But like the degree from Notre Dame, the like renown with it too, just adds a lot that is helpful to lean on, and just proving that other folks have had these circuitous paths too, and that it works out okay. So just naming those different dynamics sometimes is your needs at the time too, I guess.
To jump into, so when I came to Notre Dame and decided to do political science, although I've always loved history, because it was coming from an immigrant family, so there's a lot of pressure, you know, people like, you know, the idea of even doing political science itself was contested. You know, I was one of the few Africans who actually did not come in as a business or engineer and swear. A lot of people swear, you know, but I stuck with that belief that, or at least they will buy into the political science thing, policy, something like that, right? But I never took a political science class my first year. I took history classes. It did not tell you. Eventually, though, when I declared the history major, my parents were very supportive, but sometimes African communities also take it upon themselves to also become your extended family, so they will offer you free advice. You know, people will call my family and say, why is he wasting, you know, like a wonderful degree and pursuing history? What's he going to do? Go to Ghana and teach us, you know, secondary school? You know, people were sending me messages that folks, you know, it's even stated that history is the worst. You know, I can't venture. I can't do anything. There were some professors I met here in Notre Dame who also told me the same thing. You know? So it was like everywhere you turn, right? And then eventually, my brother was even telling me that, I mean, so we started debating, and they were saying that at least I could go to law school, right? So my brother came to me, I mean, he was really making the argument supported everybody. So he came to me privately and said, what they tell you to do, because I decided to start applying for law school in my junior year. And he was like, oh my, like you get so convinced so easily, they tell you to do. So that is when so he was part of the reasons why I decided to go to just pursue what I was still pursuing. But there was also an old professor that did a program at UNC Chapel Hill. He loves Du Bois. So he gave me this Du Bois quote that says that Du Bois said that I believe aspiration, that I have something to say. And I've taken at least 12 in order to say it well. And that really fermented my decision to just pursue, because I really believe that I had something to say to the world. I was always joking with my friends, I was going to write a book on history. And it is that conviction and that commitment to succeed and to also prove these people not necessarily wrong, but there's actually something valuable in learning about African history. But because of Kellogg and being able to travel, my research also shifts where I put Africa in conversation with the rest of the world. And that to me is something that is meaningful. To be able to wake up and write things that people are able to engage, to sit with, to think through. Was not an easy decision, but it was a worthwhile decision.
Thank you. The only thing I wanted to see is we have some parents in the room. I don't know if you two want to comment. I don't know what you thought, so I don't know if I'm opening the door.
You did a good job.
Good parents.
Thanks.
And Holly, if I can just pick up on that, because I was just hearing, I did want to speak to, I think the parents and how we're sort of bringing them along that was brought up. I mean, just a really concrete example of that, somebody who was, I think, supposed to be on this panel and now with COVID, Brian, person we referenced, was one of my very dear friends, and my parents met him, I think it was around my senior year or something, and got to know him, got to love him. And I remember a couple of years afterwards, I remember they called me and they're like, Emmy, my parents, Colorado Springs, they've never really left the US until I was at grad school in the UK. I mean, it's a different worldview. They're like, Emmy, we followed the Kenyan elections, and because we remember me, I mean, that was the first person they'd ever met, probably from the entire continent of Africa. And we're like, we followed it, and we just wanted to say we read about this day, and they had something to say about it. And they're like, you have to tell us, tell this to Brian, or pass it along. And I say that, and then Brian was in my wedding. My parents, it's like, I just say that because I think, to your point of, it's not just about your own experience. You're bringing these folks along with you, whether it's your family, whether it's the work that you're doing through what you're saying. And I hadn't really appreciated that aspect of what Kellogg did for me until some of those moments of them meeting folks who they'd been exposed to for the first time, and really falling into a relationship with them too.
Hi, my name is Quentin. I'm a senior in the International Development Studies concentration. And I just had a question for all of you, is based on the point that Andrew kind of brought up earlier about the disconnect between higher level policy recommendations and things like that, what's actually being implemented locally. I guess I was just wondering in what scenarios that has come up in your guys' work and how you impacted that.
Yeah. I mean, it's that disconnect shows up in every facet of work in international, because it's not just it's the policy making decisions, it's the money too. And so many of these NGOs that are doing things on the ground a lot of times are following the money, and that means the first priority is let's do something that's trendy, that is being financed today, and not necessarily let's do what is best for this community. And so I think there's honestly there's probably a bunch more levels, but there's also a disconnect between the big international NGOs like World Vision that's getting these grants from USAID and a local a Haitian NGO or a non-governmental organization that's run by I don't know, that's Chilean in Chile, right? There's also another level of disconnect there too. It comes up on all levels. I think That's, there's all other players. International development is extremely complex. Trying to think of, maybe a more concrete example. At the university I worked at in Haiti, they had opened in 2004. It was destroyed by the earthquake in 2010, and it was kind of being rebuilt. And when I first came on board in 2017, they had a big problem with money. And the previous director of the university left the university with a lot of debt. And one of my main jobs coming on board was to help the university get out of that debt and kind of reform its management, its governance, its financial management. But the big thing that was going on, I think, is the founder, who's an amazing man. His name is Father Joseph, absolute saint. He also founded Fonds Jose. It's the biggest microbank in Haiti. And he also founded this university. But he was too focused on doing things to get donors money to keep the university going. And you can't run an organization like that. That's why they got into this problem. You have to put the quality of the organization first. So that first year I was there, we eliminated all the debt of the university, and we had not raised any extra money than what the sources we already had. And it was just by better managing it and stopping the rush of thinking, we gotta apply for grants, apply for this, contact them. You have to have a well-run organization first and foremost that that responds to the biggest stakeholder, which are the community you're serving, or else it's not going to work, I think, or you're going to have all sorts of problems. That foundation has to be solid. I'm sure I could come up with a lot of other examples. I think there's a lot of value to, if you can, try to work on both sides of things. I had a tiny little internship with the USAID. Now I'm doing consulting for the World Bank. So I'm still kind of seeing that extremely high level, right, and policy making that really has a lot of influence. That kind of cascades down onto all these other organizations. And what it eventually gets, the people, the beneficiaries on the ground. I think you always have to remember it's just an extremely complex, complicated industry. And that's part of succeeding in that industry is learning how to navigate it. And so the more experience you can get, the better. So try to get that entry level job wherever you can, or that entry level experience, and take everything you can from it and keep building off of it. And see where you can add value, right? I know that's a very cliche thing to say, but that's ultimately what you're doing. You're trying to figure out how I can add value to this organization. And the more information you can get, the more experiences you can get, the better you can do that.
Just to add, I totally agree. This is just something that is in the space. It's very complex. And I think it's also something that I see in our US work. There's sort of a reckoning around, even without the sort of international dynamic that adds complication, how are you including the communities you're serving? A handful of just very practical things that came up in our Kellogg Commons casual conversations, but in the nonprofit perspective, most of my career has been in the nonprofit space. There are some things you can look at to understand, is this organization an organization that really exists to its core? And it can be hard to translate, some of these concepts of accompaniment and things that have come up, dignity, into a nonprofit, and how do you measure that? Because they're not going to say you believe in the accompaniment, right? And that's not what that's not the language they're going to say. But you look at their theory of change. I'm looking at Steve, theory of change and mission. I mean, really can tell you a lot. Look at their financials, which are publicly available for most nonprofits, and then look at their org chart, and that will tell you a lot about how they approach the work that they're doing. That's exactly what I did about the organization I'm currently at. And I looked at the job description, but I spent a lot more time actually just looking at the organization itself. For instance, we're a global organization. Our work is not US and then globals underneath the US frame, which is how some US-based nonprofits structure. It's very much structured with a governance structure that's a different sort of partnership approach. So I know I'm getting really in the weeds there, but just tactically speaking, if you're trying to navigate, this is a complex space and there are players based on various motivations Andrew talked about that might not be doing things the way that sits well with you. There are clues you can look for and when you're navigating the space.
That's extremely insightful.
Go ahead.
Hi, great panel. So Deborah Robo, second year PhD student who studies history. at Crop and also at Kellogg, whichever the thing is. Just going back to travel, just from my own experience, being where you are, and also the receiving end. Sometimes when you travel, you're entering institutions, communities from a point of privilege. Privilege being, whether it's racial, whether it's gender, financial, the privilege works differently in different spaces. I just wondering the advice you could give, how you navigate that relationship with where you're going, being able to get what you need out of it, but also when you're serving communities or institutions where you work and are partners.
I think that's a hard question. Oh, by the way, the Boris question before I come up to. So, I mean, so when I'm working in Ghana, there's the privilege when I mentioned that I go to Oxford, which opens certain doors for me to meet the president or whoever I need to get access to. When I was a Fulbright scholar, right, which opens the door to also get certain materials, certain people to let them through. I look very, very young, and most of the time people will not respect me because, like, oh, there's one kid with me. So there's a way in which sometimes I have to leverage that privilege, Fulbright scholar, Western PhD, to be able to be taken seriously. Sometimes at work, sometimes people don't care. Because sometimes people also look at you like, oh, you think you're coming from abroad, so you better. And they will make sure that they will not help you. There's a commitment to that. So I can't really answer your question, but I feel like you can use whatever privilege that is important for you to get to, because you need to utilize something. Otherwise, you cannot do research. So I think, yeah, based on the context and the situation, you can using the name Notre Dame will open a lot of doors. If you're in Ghana, you were talking about peace and conflict, all come to Notre Dame. Everybody will be able to do that. So it all depends. So I feel like it's important to use these things.
Yeah, I feel like it's a really like wicked question, a very paradoxical question, because on the one hand, there's this motion towards kind of radical global support, solidarity, cross-pollination of ideas, the potential that exists in people connecting from different places and having that exchange and spread. And on the other side, there's so many challenges related to power, privilege, money, identity, etc. in that exchange. And figuring out how to, what is that creative place in the middle where the kind of cross-pollination, global relationships furthers the local wisdom and ownership and movement for people who are committed to a place in the long term. So I imagine that it involves like a number of level of things to do well. One is that like internal personal work, which is we're all like need to be doing, and it is not a thing that is like you reach a level and achieve it. I think it's a constant process of learning, unlearning, relearning, moving with humility, having moments that challenge you. I think that there's some pieces in that to what you're saying about like the organizational theories of change and being like mindful and looking for opportunities or like how those exchanges happen if like you feel resonant with the theory of change that is underway, and like looking for white savior complex and like many modalities of kind of rooted in some pretty problematic things that are still very present in many organizations. There's a whole realm as well, which I'm a bit tapped into, of like the decentralized autonomous organizations and Web3 and teal organizing and these like radically horizontal communities of practice who are stepping away even from funding and grants and stuff to be like, we're actually making global collectives that are gonna like self-finance among ourselves without needing to have these middlemen. And so that's like the frontier that I'm really excited about and seeing all across the world of like people actually establishing alternative systems to be in radical support with each other in ways that disrupt these global financial models that have been so incredibly problematic in development and peace building and otherwise. I appreciate the question though, because it's like an ongoing thing that's really hard to deal with on a personal level and the we level and the systems level.
Yeah, and just to very quickly add on to what you and Brett said, I think no matter where you go, there are gonna be some places you can't enter, and there are some places you're always gonna be more valued in. You know, when I was in Guadalupe, interviewing immigrants, they were like all men. I was never able to, interview a woman. None of the women immigrants would trust me to, because I was working with undocumented immigrants. So if I denounced them and, Guadeloupe was part of France, so, I might look French to, a Haitian there. So it wasn't easy to convince people to let me talk to them about that. And then, in Haiti, I was working at a Haitian university with a Haitian board, Haitian founded, vying for the peasants. And there were absolutely, times when we discussed where it's clear the team, different people on the team with different ideas wanted me on their side because there was some sort of like idea. It's a big thing in Haiti too, just, always wanting to connect what your idea to a foreigner's idea to say, well, they do it in this country. They do it in the US, that gives it more value. And but at the same time, like Brett said, there are going to be other people who think, oh, you're an American, you don't understand the reality here. You're coming at it from your level. You don't understand the reality. You'll never understand the reality. And that's just the way the world works, I think, with any interaction you use. And it's just something else to navigate. And I think navigating it is a skill that you build, and you get better and better at it. Yeah.
To throw in one unsolicited piece of advice, I can't, you all spoke so eloquently about it, but just a really fairly simple starting place suggestion that I would give, especially for the undergrads when you're going somewhere for the first time is, Holly does a really good job bringing in these folks. If you're not from the country where you're traveling to, not just talking to other people who are not from the country that you're traveling to about their experience, but like you have a whole host of very international, especially this whole like school that didn't exist when we were here. Like go talk to, if you're going to Uganda, like go talk to a Ugandan. Like I guarantee you there is at least one. And like Holly has tapped into a lot of those people, but some of them might not be like a Kellogg student. Like they might be your person in the business, in your econ class can just tell you. And it's like, that is the, like, again, not going to solve some of the challenges, but like very easy initial step every single student should do before they are a student not from that country traveling there. I did that, but only later on, and I wish I had done it for the first time I went.
We're out of time, but I have to say, this was a privilege to sit and listen to what all you said, and frankly, it makes me a bit emotional to hear who you are today, given what I knew of you. About the work we do here. But honestly, thank you so much for coming back, for sharing. I mean, I think it gives a lot of us who work here also this kind of feeling of like, look where people go and what you do and the wisdom you share. I mean, it's really amazing. So thank you for coming back and for sharing with us today.
Also, thank you, Holly.
Thank you.